back to After the Storm. Now, here's Steve Ferentz.
Welcome back. I'm Steve Ferentz. Of course, as epic as the flooding was, it can be easy to lose focus of those individuals and families who were impacted by the storms. Many lost everything and are still struggling to come to grips with what happened and even how to move forward. I spoke with one such family in the village of Schoharie. Melissa Kakarika spoke with another in Vestal.
Everybody has a story.
2 weeks after Tropical Storm Irene dumped inches of rain in hours on the 1,300 people living in the village of Schoharie, it's been the story of utter destruction. If at first the fear had been the damaging winds, that fear was quickly washed away by the 10 or more inches that fell on nearby towns and villages. Water with nowhere to go but into the Schoharie Creek that raged above its banks, looking for victims far beyond its yearly floodplain.
They can have 4 feet of snow, of a snowpack, and when that thaws, you know, then we get floods, hard floods in the spring.
But not like this.
But not like this, no.
Some have called it the second 100-year flood in 15 years. Others say this was a 500-year event. 76-year-old Betsy Guernsey simply says it's far beyond what she ever thought possible.
We had a sudden surge in water here late Sunday afternoon into the evening. And you could see the water was high, but it was flowing and it was not any problem. And then suddenly the surge came through and you could see the water rise like 2 to 3 feet in like half an hour.
There were the concerns about the Gilboa Dam. It holds back billions of gallons of water upstream, casting a shadow of unease over the valley. Ironically, that fear helped Betsy and her neighbors to evacuate quickly. But she left everything behind, never thinking the water would get so high.
I would say probably about here.
So the water was up to our shoulders?
Yeah, yeah.
So many homes in the village tell the same story. Some saw their foundations ripped apart, but mostly the damage is deceiving, like a dollhouse shaken on the inside, appearing untouched from the outside. First floors filled with water, a thick, slippery mud clinging to everything, claiming those things we hold dearest.
This used to be my husband's closet where he kept thousands and thousands of slide files from his trip to South America many years ago. Threw them away. It was just too much. All the pictures of Lake George when the kids were little, that they're history.
Water and mud, not just taking tangible memories of her late husband, but also taking away current friends, too.
A wonderful lady came and picked her up and took her to Clifton Park. I had an orange cat. She's probably better off there, I would say.
After the Schoharie Creek ran through Main Street, it seems there wasn't any part of village life left untouched. The banks in town destroyed. A mobile ATM setup was the only way to access precious cash for the basic necessities. The lower floor of the courthouse destroyed. Operations moved elsewhere. Businesses on Main Street destroyed. Equipment unsalvageable. What was the Great American Grocery Store before the economy shut it down has become the village dump. It's where all the water heaters, countless refrigerators, and soaked business supplies sit as a quiet testament to the damage inside each building. Another flooding casualty, Betsy's family business, Guernsey's Schoharie Nurseries.
The office is wrecked. The outbuildings are wrecked. Some of the equipment that had motors were not removed and taken to higher ground.
With so much lost, Betsy knows it would be a daunting challenge to restore the 100-year-old business now run by her son. Basically, it would be starting over.
Who wants to buy a shrub that's got Schoharie Valley mud all over it, dried mud at this point?
And just down the street, 2 weeks after Irene's flooding, 2 weeks after everyone here had no idea where to even begin, there is progress. Of course, that progress is very slow. You can see bucket after bucket being taken out of a hole in the foundation in this house, thick mud, and it's going to take weeks, if not months, to finish the job.
Most of these beautiful old homes are owned and populated by people in their late 60s and 70s, maybe even older, and lots of them are just plain single. The husband or the wife is gone, and that's what we're faced with. These people across the way, they're in their 80s. You know, what to do? You kind of run out of money at that stage in life.
And many folks didn't have flood insurance because this type of flooding just doesn't happen.
My husband was so proud of the fact that he was about maybe 3 inches above the stage, above the minimum where you had to have flood insurance.
Her house is paid off, but it's still a question of how much she's willing to put into rebuilding it, because she could see flooding again. In the meantime, her house was gutted by volunteers who knew people like Betsy might need help ripping out the soaked sheetrock, a magnet for mold. Still in shock, a couple weeks after the storm, she had no idea if she would leave her home since 1957 or not.
So I am left with a shell, and I don't know what to do with my shell. I think it's beyond me right now. I would love to say I'm strong enough to do it, but I don't think I am.
With her emotions still raw, with the loss of everything she owned, Betsy Guernsey never thought she would be sharing the story of the tough decisions she's been left with, to leave her home and village behind, or to rebuild. And either way, starting over in her mid-70s. An impossible question shared by so many others across the region.
When lives are turned upside down, as so many were in those late summer months, it can be tough to see a path back to normalcy. Almost 3 months after the storms hit, we went back to those families we introduced to you earlier in the show to see if their lives were back on track or if their lives were still being dominated by the floods.
I didn't know where to begin, and I began by walking out.
We revisited Betsy Guernsey more than 2 months after she lost everything in the worst flooding ever seen in the village of Schoharie. She struggled with whether to leave the destruction behind or to rebuild.
You know what happened here in Schoharie in particular was people were just mind-boggled by the destruction. And when you look at your house and you realize that for many people, to bring it back the way it was is going to cost more than the house was worth. So a lot of people have thought, I can't do that. It's too late in life.
She considered buying property on higher ground or leaving the village altogether. But as you can probably already tell, we met her in her house because she just couldn't leave it all behind.
And you are sticking around.
Oh yeah. For this time, if we flood again, it's bye-bye.
She says her family has lived here for hundreds of years and doesn't think flooding like this will happen again. So she's willing to take one more chance.
But that was a freak storm. It's my opinion that it was the perfect storm, similar to the one that hit the East Coast, New England. There was a series of events that came together that allowed that hurricane to almost stop dead in its tracks in this valley.
Now it's the painstaking work of cleaning every inch of her home. New electrical wires have been put in. Charity workers installed insulation in the walls.
We have water, we don't have hot water, we don't have the furnace going, and the furnace won't be going until we get the water pipes to the second floor.
These the first steps. As Betsy expects to stay with family for months, her house still uninhabitable, especially with the winter weather setting in. As for her beloved village, there are some signs of progress. The need for that temporary ATM truck parked on Main Street has passed, but courthouse operations still run out of another building. Signs on business windows tell customers to call for appointments, but others, dusty from the dried mud, tell of businesses closing their doors for good. And then there's Betsy's family business, Guernsey's Schoharie Nursery.
The office is down to the studs, as I was. He lost a lot of equipment. He lost a lot of the stuff that he dug. That was in the fields about a half mile away. So he's going to start again.
If you're going to ask anyone about how many people will be staying here or how many people will leave the mess behind, Betsy is probably the one to ask. She has her finger on the pulse of the village. She knows most people by their first name. Her husband was even the mayor for 20+ years, and she says that most people now have decided to stay. You can even hear the reverberations of hammers coming from almost every house in her neighborhood.
The village, I don't know how long it's going to take to recoup. The people who really thought, I can't do this, I'm getting out, have reconsidered and are sticking around, fixing up gradually. Maybe they're going into their savings, and maybe they're doing it with a lot of friends. FEMA's been very, very helpful.
She says there are a number of people, especially middle-aged couples, who have already left, avoiding any future flooding. But this Thanksgiving, Betsy Guernsey is thankful for her family and for living in a village she's confident will stand again.
Everybody is pulling together. They want to succeed. We have had meetings about where do we go from here, how can we put the village back, what are some of the things that need to be addressed now rather than wait, and we have some good younger minds that are doing that work.
Glimmers of hope, of renewal, from the inside out. A story about not knowing where to begin after losing so much, but also a story about how time does begin to heal, even after flooding that still seems so unimaginable.